In the sprawling, iridescent canyons of Neo-Seoul, where holographic ads danced across skyscrapers and the hum of maglevs was the city's perpetual heartbeat, Jian existed in a quiet, almost spectral solitude. His apartment, high above the bustling streets, was a sanctuary of minimalist design, yet it felt vast and empty. Every polished surface, every clean line, echoed the meticulous order he tried to impose on his life since Lena left. Her absence wasn't a gaping wound anymore, but a phantom ache, a dull throb beneath the surface of his carefully constructed routine. He was an archivist for digital histories, a curator of other people's pasts. A cruel irony given his own reluctance to touch the most precious archive of all, Lena's Chronos weave. The Chronos archive was the marvel of their age, a perfect digital recreation of a person's life, every memory, every sensation, every nuance meticulously recorded and stored. For those left behind, it promised solace, a chance to relive moments with loved ones. But for Jian, it felt like a betrayal, a synthetic substitute for a love that had been so vibrantly, profoundly real. He'd seen others, lost souls, wandering the digital hallways of their grief, tethered to echoes, unable to truly move forward. He swore he wouldn't become one of them. Yet, some nights, as the twin moons cast long, silver shadows across his room, a single, glowing icon on his data slate would call to him, the digital key to Lena's Chronos. He would trace its outline with a hesitant finger, the warmth of the screen a fleeting connection to a ghost. The city outside glittered with 1,000 futures, but Jian remained anchored to a past he couldn't grasp, a love he couldn't release, trapped in the melancholic stillness of his own design. Days bled into weeks, each one a carbon copy of the last. Jian's meals were functional, his work precise, his interactions polite but distant. He was a vessel navigating the present, while his heart remained adrift in the currents of a bygone era. Then, one crisp morning, amidst the usual flood of datacom notifications, automated news feeds, work directives, system updates, a single, unassuming message materialized. It wasn't a reminder from the Chronos archive, but an old, undelivered message, programmed to release on Lena's designated completion date within the system. It was from her. Her digital signature glowed, a warm, familiar presence in the sterile interface. The message was simple. Jian, if you ever feel lost, come find me in the Chronos. I'll be waiting. Lena. A tremor ran through him, a jolt that shook the foundations of his carefully maintained composure. He felt a pull, an inexorable magnetism he'd fought for so long. Later that afternoon, he found himself standing before the shimmering facade of the Chronos archive, a monolithic structure of glass and light, pulsing with the silent energy of countless stored lives. The air inside was cool, clinical, scented faintly with ozone and antiseptic. Attendants, clad in pristine white, moved with an almost ethereal grace, guiding individuals to private immersion chambers. Jian felt a profound apprehension, a sense of trespassing on sacred ground. Was he ready to see her again, not as a memory in his mind, but as an almost perfect digital replica? Was he ready to confront the pain, the solace, the potential deception of it all? He hesitated at the entrance to a vacant chamber, his hand hovering over the biometric scanner. The system recognized his credentials, Lena's designated next of kin. The door slid open silently, revealing a plush, dimly lit space, dominated by a sleek immersion pod. He stepped inside, the door whispering shut behind him, plunging him into a quiet, expectant darkness. It felt like walking into a dream he wasn't sure he wanted to wake from. The immersion pod hummed to life, a gentle vibration reverberating through Jian's body. He closed his eyes, and a wave of cool, sensory data washed over him. He was no longer in the sterile chamber but standing in their old apartment, sunlight streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the air. Lena was there, humming a soft tune as she painted at her easel, her back to him. The scent of her linseed oil and distant coffee filled the air, so real it stung his eyes. This was the memory he had chosen for his first session, a quiet, ordinary Saturday morning. He watched her, a ghost in his own past, perfectly rendered. Her hair, the way it fell across her shoulders, the slight tension in her artistic hands, the familiar curve of her neck as she leaned into her work. He felt the soft carpet beneath his feet, heard the distant rumble of the city, tasted the familiar sweetness of a life he thought was irrevocably gone. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her shoulder, aching to touch, to confirm. But the system, precise as it was, maintained the sacred boundary. He was an observer, not a participant in these pristine echoes. When she finally turned, a smile blooming on her face, her eyes met his, full of warmth, alive. "Gianna," she said, her voice a melody he hadn't realized he'd forgotten. "You're home." In that instant, the pain of knowing it wasn't real was momentarily eclipsed by the sheer, overwhelming joy of seeing her, hearing her, feeling her presence again. But as the session neared its programmed end, a subtle shift occurred. The edges of the apartment began to shimmer. Lena's smile softened, becoming more ethereal, her voice a faint whisper. He felt himself being gently pulled back, the warmth fading, the sense dissolving. He fought it, desperately clinging to the fleeting moment, to her face, to the illusion. Then, with a soft sigh, he was back in the pod, the silence of the chamber a stark, cold contrast to the vibrant world he'd just left. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, a testament to the exquisite, unbearable bittersweetness of these fleeting returns. It was solace, yes, but a solace that carved deeper the hollow of her absence. The initial hesitation had evaporated, replaced by an insatiable hunger. Jian found himself returning to the Chronos archive with increasing frequency, losing himself in the intricate tapestry of Lena's digitized life. His own world began to shrink, the vibrant colors of Neo-Soul dimming in comparison to the luminescence of her past. He spent hours reliving their first date, a clumsy, endearing affair at a bustling night market, the taste of street food, the scent of grilling skewers, the nervous laughter, all perfectly reconstructed. He re-experienced quiet evenings spent reading side by side, her hand occasionally finding his, a silent, comforting connection. Each session was a meticulously crafted dream, a potent narcotic that dulled the ache of the present. His work, once a meticulous anchor, became perfunctory. His apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a cold, empty prison awaiting his next escape. Colleagues noticed his detachment, the faraway look in his eyes. "Are you all right, Jen?" they would ask, their concern a gentle pressure he deflected with vague assurances. But he wasn't all right. He was adrift, caught between two worlds. The Chronos became his primary reality. He would awaken in his bed, the weight of Lena's absence heavy, only to eagerly anticipate the moment he could return to her, to the memories, to the perfect, unblemished past. He started neglecting his physical well-being, skipping meals, his sleep patterns erratic, haunted by the digital ghost of Lena during the brief hours he spent in actual sleep. He knew, intellectually, that this was unsustainable, that he was becoming one of the lost souls he once pitied. But the pull was too strong, the comfort too seductive. The edges of his own reality began to blur, the vibrant memories of the Chronos bleeding into his waking hours, making the mundane world feel drab and hollow. He yearned for her touch, her voice, her laughter, and the Chronos delivered, but always with the cruel reminder that it was just an echo, a reflection in a digital mirror. He was living a life of perpetual goodbye, caught in an endless loop of beautiful, agonizing farewells. In his deep immersion, a subtle shift began to occur. At first, it was barely perceptible, a flicker at the periphery of his consciousness, easily dismissed. He was revisiting a memory of them walking through a late autumn park, the crisp air, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot. Lena was laughing, her head thrown back, a scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. He remembered the moment vividly, her pure, unadulterated joy. But this time something felt off. Her laugh, while beautiful, seemed to carry a fleeting, almost imperceptible tremor, a strained quality he hadn't recalled. Then, a few sessions later, while replaying a conversation about her latest art project, a passion that consumed her. Her usual enthusiastic cadence stumbled. She spoke of her challenges, her creative blocks, and for a fraction of a second, her eyes, usually alight with fierce determination, held a shadow, a fleeting vulnerability he couldn't place. He paused the memory, rewound it, played it again. He scrutinized her face, her gestures, her voice. Was he imagining it? Was his own grief-addled mind projecting new interpretations onto old memories? He initially dismissed it, attributing it to his own fading recollections, or perhaps the Chronos system's occasional, almost imperceptible glitches. No system was truly flawless, after all. But the unease persisted, a small, discordant note in the otherwise perfect symphony of their past. It was like a tiny flaw in a priceless painting. Once you noticed it, it was all you could see. He began to search for them, these subtle imperfections. A hesitation in a gesture, a momentary blankness in her eyes, a phrase that felt slightly rehearsed. He found himself scrutinizing Lena's digital form with an intensity bordering on obsession, no longer basking in the warmth of shared nostalgia, but dissecting every pixel, every sound wave. The more he looked, the more he felt an unsettling truth emerging, not about the system's fidelity, but about the memories themselves. Or perhaps, more disturbingly, about Lena herself. Had she been hiding things from him even then? The thought was a cold, sharp stab, replacing the melancholic comfort with a burgeoning sense of profound disquiet. The discordant notes multiplied, growing louder in Jian's mind until they became an unbearable cacophony. He couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was amiss within Lena's Chronos weave. A subtle but persistent deviation from the Lena he knew, the Lena he had loved. Driven by an urgent need for answers, he sought out Dr. Han, the reclusive chief architect of the Chronos Archive, a man whose genius was matched only by his enigmatic presence. Dr. Han's private office, nestled within the quietest sector of the archive, was a stark contrast to the gleaming public spaces. It was filled with antique books, holographic models of neural pathways, and the soft glow of data screens displaying complex algorithms. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and an underlying metallic tang, a testament to countless hours spent immersed in the intricate dance between memory and technology. Dr. Han himself was a man of quiet intensity. His silver hair swept back from a sharp, intelligent face, his eyes deep pools of weary wisdom. He listened patiently as Jian, his voice tinged with desperation, recounted the subtle inconsistencies, the fleeting shadows he'd perceived in Lena's archived memories. He spoke of the strained laughter, the momentary blankness, the feeling of something withheld. Dr. Han steepled his fingers, his gaze distant, as if sifting through the countless lives stored within his own creation. The Chronos Archive, he began, his voice a low, resonant baritone, is designed for fidelity, Jian. Every synapse, every sensory input, every emotional resonance is captured with unprecedented precision. We strive for absolute truth. He paused, then continued, a subtle shift in his tone. However, human memory, even when perfectly archived, is a subjective landscape. And the act of curation, even by the individual themselves during the initial weaving, can influence the final tapestry. Jian felt a chill. Curation? What does that mean? Dr. Han sighed, a long, weary sound. It means we all present a version of ourselves, even to the deepest recording protocols. We highlight certain moments, perhaps unconsciously downplay others. And the system, in its attempt to optimize for emotional preservation for the surviving loved ones, may subtly smooth over rough edges. We all wish to leave behind a legacy of strength, of happiness. Jian looked at him, a sudden, profound understanding dawning. You mean the system might have filtered Lena's memories? To make them less painful for me? Dr. Han's gaze met his, heavy with a shared understanding of human fragility and the complex ethics of their creation. Not filtered, Paresi, more gently presented, to honor the idealized image a loved one might hold. We believed, in our pursuit of comfort, that we were providing solace. But the truth, Jian, is always more complex than the heart desires. Jian left Dr. Han's sanctuary with more questions than answers, a bitter taste in his mouth. The notion that Lena's Chronos was not a pure reflection, but a gently polished version, was more unsettling than any technical glitch. It meant the Lena he was communing with was not the full Lena, and that the architect of this grand illusion carried his own melancholic burden of imperfect solace. Armed with Dr. Han's unsettling revelation, Jian's visits to the Chronos archive transformed from a quest for solace into an archaeological dig. He was no longer content to merely bask in the curated sunshine of their shared past. He sought the shadowed crevices, the unexamined strata where raw, unfiltered truths might reside. He utilized the deeper access protocols Dr. Han had hinted at, navigating through labyrinthine submenus and unlabeled data clusters. The sleek, user-friendly interface gave way to a complex web of raw code, diagnostic logs, and unprocessed sensory inputs, the digital detritus of a life. It was here, in these unseen layers, that he began to find fragments. Not coherent memories, but flashes. A blurry image of Lena in her studio, not painting with vibrant energy, but staring blankly at a canvas, a brush idle in her hand, her shoulders slumped in a posture of profound defeat. A snippet of audio, not her usual melodic voice, but a whispered sigh, almost inaudible, laced with a despair he'd never heard from her before. These fragments were jarring, like finding an unfinished, deeply melancholic sketch hidden beneath a finished, joyful portrait. They didn't fit the narrative of the vibrant, resilient Lena he had always cherished, the Lena presented in the carefully woven Chronos. He found a series of entries marked personal reflections, unsorted. These weren't intended for viewing, even by Lena's closest kin. They were raw, stream of consciousness thought patterns, snippets of her internal monologue that had been captured by the neural interface during moments of unguarded solitude. He saw her grappling with self-doubt, her creative spirit flagging under immense pressure, both internal and external. He saw her fear of failure, her silent anxieties about whether her art truly mattered, whether she truly mattered. Each discovery was a punch to the gut. The Lena in these raw fragments was vulnerable, struggling, and deeply human in a way the polished Chronos Echo simply wasn't. He realized with a dawning horror that he had been so immersed in the perfection of the shared memories that he had overlooked the profound, complex humanity of the woman he loved. He had accepted the beautiful lie, and in doing so had missed the silent battles she was fighting. The melancholic beauty of the past now felt like a veil, a shimmering illusion that had obscured a deeper, more profound truth about Lena's interior world. He was seeing her not as his idealized memory, but as she truly was, flawed and magnificent in her struggle, and the pain of that realization was a new, unfamiliar grief. Amidst the raw, fragmented data, one particular snippet began to recur, a ghost within the ghost. It was brief, perhaps no more than a few seconds, but it resonated with an unsettling power. He first found it embedded within a timeline of their happier moments, an almost imperceptible flaw. It was a close-up of Lena's face, captured during a seemingly joyful gathering of friends. Laughter and cheerful chatter echoed in the background. Yet, for a split second, her eyes held a profound, aching sadness, a fleeting shadow that passed so quickly it was almost missed. Her smile, though wide, didn't quite reach them. Then, in the next frame, it was gone, replaced by her usual radiant warmth. Jian found himself looping this fragment, dissecting it frame by frame, sound wave by sound wave. The more he watched, the more convinced he became that this wasn't an anomaly or a glitch. It was a key. It appeared again in another context, this time from a memory of them walking along the Han River. They were talking about future plans, about their dreams, and Lena's voice, usually filled with buoyant optimism, contained a subtle, almost imperceptible quiver at one point. Just as she was about to elaborate, she trailed off, her gaze drifting to the distant lights of the city, and that same shadow crossed her eyes. He couldn't shake it. This recurring shadow, this fleeting vulnerability, became an obsession. He felt an intense, almost primal urge to understand what lay behind it, what secret pain Lena had carried, unspoken and unseen. It felt like a hidden message she had left for him, buried deep within the layers of their love. A silent plea he hadn't known how to answer. The beauty of their shared Chronos began to feel like a cruel deception, a carefully constructed illusion designed to protect him from a truth she couldn't bear to share. His heart ached not just for her absence, but for the silent burden she had carried, a burden he was only now beginning to perceive. The melancholic comfort of the archive had been replaced by a melancholic quest, a desperate search for the real Lena, the one who existed beneath the surface of perfect memories, the one who held a secret sorrow he was finally ready to face. Driven by an unwavering resolve, Jian returned to the Chronos archive, his purpose now crystal clear. He bypassed the curated narratives, delving into the deepest, most shielded sectors of Lena's digital existence. Dr. Han's earlier insights, combined with Jian's own archivist's intuition, guided him through intricate firewalls and encryption layers. He was no longer seeking comfort, but truth, no matter how painful. He eventually located a deeply encrypted subarchive, labeled only with a series of complex alphanumeric characters. It wasn't an unprocessed section like the earlier reflections. This felt deliberate, a place Lena had intentionally hidden, perhaps hoping it would remain undiscovered. With a final, agonizing decryption, the archive unlocked. What he found wasn't a collection of perfect memories, nor even fragments of fleeting sadness. It was a series of personal journals, not spoken, but a direct neural recording of her thoughts, raw and unfiltered, captured during her moments of intense solitude. These weren't memories to be replayed, but a direct communion with her deepest, most private consciousness. The narration shifted, becoming less about external observation and more about internal experience. Jian felt himself enveloped by Lena's emotional landscape, seeing the world through her eyes, feeling the weight of her unspoken fears. He saw her desperate struggles with her art, the pressure she felt to create something monumental, something that would define her, only to be met with creative stagnation and self-doubt. He witnessed her internal battles against the insidious whispers of inadequacy, the fear that her passion was not enough, that she was not enough. He saw the moments when she would force a smile, a laugh to reassure him, to project an image of unwavering strength, all while her spirit was slowly crumbling under the weight of her hidden anxieties. It was a profound, agonizing immersion, a direct pipeline into her soul. He understood now the source of the recurring shadow, the momentary tremor in her voice. They were echoes of a silent battle, a war she fought within herself, unbeknownst to him. The pain was unbearable, but it was also profoundly real, connecting him to Lena in a way the polished Chronos had never managed. He was not just seeing her. He was feeling her, her despair, her hope, her beautiful, flawed humanity laid bare. The journals unfolded before Jian's consciousness, not as a linear narrative, but as a maelstrom of raw emotion and unfiltered thought. He was privy to Lena's most intimate struggles, battles she had waged in solitude, shielded from his loving gaze. He saw her creative spirit, once so vibrant and fiercely independent, slowly begin to wither under the immense pressure she placed upon herself. The city's art scene, once a source of inspiration, became a crucible of comparison, a constant reminder of her perceived shortcomings. She documented her nights spent staring at blank canvases, the agonizing void where ideas once flowed freely, replaced now by a paralyzing self-doubt. The joy she once found in painting had become a source of torment, each brushstroke a monumental effort, each failed attempt a dagger to her soul. More profoundly, he witnessed her fear of burdening him. She wrote of her fierce love for Jian, and her desperate need to protect him from her internal despair. She believed that admitting her struggles, her creative block, her profound sense of inadequacy, would somehow diminish his love, would make him see her as less than the radiant, confident artist he cherished. She constructed an elaborate emotional facade, a vibrant, resilient persona she wore for him, meticulously concealing the depths of her suffering. He saw her practicing smiles in the mirror, rehearsing upbeat answers to his innocent questions about her work, all while a silent scream echoed within her. The revelation was a cataclysm. Jian felt a profound, aching sorrow, not only for Lena's suffering, but for his own blindness. He had been so wrapped up in the beauty of their life together, in the perfection of their love, that he had missed the silent tears, the hidden anxieties, the quiet desperation she had so expertly masked. The Chronos archive, designed to preserve and offer comfort, had instead become a conduit for a brutal, beautiful truth, ripping open old wounds and creating new ones. His idealized vision of Lena, of their perfect love, shattered into a million pieces, leaving behind a more complex, more human, and infinitely more heartbreaking truth. He felt the cold shock of betrayal not by Lena, but by his own idealized memory, and by a system that had unwittingly conspired to keep him in comforting ignorance. The immersion pod felt like a coffin, sealing him in with this raw, agonizing truth, Lena's silent burden now becoming his own. The full weight of Lena's silent burden crashed down upon Jian, a devastating wave that obliterated the carefully constructed edifice of his grief. His idealized Lena, the luminous, unwavering artist of his memories, was gone. In her place stood a Lena far more real, more vulnerable, and infinitely more human. A Lena who grappled with crushing self-doubt, who fought lonely battles against her own despair, who wore a brave smile even as her spirit frayed. The emotional climax wasn't a sudden explosion, but a profound, internal implosion. He felt a searing pain of regret, not for what he had lost, but for what he had never truly seen. He replayed fragments of their past together, not through the Chronos, but through his own raw memory, overlaid with the harrowing knowledge he had just acquired. He remembered moments when she seemed withdrawn, when her eyes held that fleeting shadow, when her laugh had a strained edge. He had dismissed them then, attributed them to fatigue or stress. Now, they were undeniable evidence of her silent suffering, a testament to his unwitting ignorance. A wave of anger, hot and bitter, surged through him. Anger at himself for not seeing, for not asking, for not breaking through her protective facade. Anger at the Chronos system for its curated perfection, for offering a comforting lie that had obscured the deeper, more profound truth of his love. And ultimately, a renewed, agonizing grief for Lena, not just for her absence, but for the silent battles she had fought and lost alone, for the strength she had to muster every day, for the burdens she carried that he never knew. The pod felt suffocating. The immersive connection, once a source of solace, now felt like a torment, chaining him to a truth too heavy to bear. He ripped the neural interface from his temples, the sudden disconnection jarring and painful. The sterile chamber, once a gateway to a beautiful past, now felt like a sterile tomb, echoing with the raw, guttural cries he couldn't hold back. He doubled over, tears streaming down his face, not just for Lena's loss, but for the shattering of his own idealized love, and the profound, agonizing realization that he had cherished an incomplete ghost, while the real Lena had suffered in silence. The perfect dream had dissolved, leaving behind a stark, aching reality. This was a deeper, more profound grief, one that stripped him bare of all illusions. The world outside the Chronos archive felt stark, almost painfully real. Jian emerged from the facility not as one who had found solace, but as one profoundly shaken, disoriented by the seismic shift in his understanding of Lena. The vibrant, luminous digital memories, once his sanctuary, now felt like a cruel deception, a beautifully constructed lie that had kept him from truly seeing, truly understanding. He avoided the archive, the very thought of its gleaming facade now evoking a visceral repulsion. The lure of its comforting echoes was broken. The quiet solitude of his apartment, once a retreat, now felt like a desolate wasteland. The silence screamed with Lena's unspoken sorrows, her hidden struggles echoing in every empty space. He wandered the familiar rooms, touching objects that Lena had once held, a discarded paintbrush on her easel, a worn teacup on the counter, the spine of a book they had read together. These tangible remnants, once sources of tender nostalgia, now carried the heavy weight of her secret pain. His reality, once neatly compartmentalized into the comforting past of the Chronos and his muted present, was now a chaotic blend. The true Lena, complex and vulnerable, had fully integrated into his perception, shattering the idealized image he had clung to for so long. The pain was raw, untempered by the digital filter of the archive. It was a fresh, agonizing grief, one that acknowledged not just her absence, but her profound human struggle. He found solace in the tactile, the imperfect, the rough texture of an old canvas Lena had abandoned, the faint scent of dried paint, the way the sunlight fell on their old, faded sofa. These physical realities grounded him in a way no digital recreation ever could. He began to see the beauty in imperfection, the truth in the flaws, the profound humanity in vulnerability. He was recalibrating, slowly and painfully, his understanding of love, of memory, of grief itself. The journey back to himself was arduous, each step a conscious effort to shed the illusions and embrace the raw, unfiltered truth of Lena, and of his own, now much clearer, past. The melancholic quiet remained, but it was no longer the quiet of ignorance, but the quiet of dawning, authentic understanding. Days turned into a blur of raw emotion and introspection. Jian felt a profound need to reconnect with the physical world, to walk the paths they had once shared, not through the lens of a digital recreation, but with his own feet on solid ground. He sought out the places that held their genuine memories, allowing the tangible reality to anchor him. He visited their old neighborhood cafe, its familiar aroma of roasted beans and warm pastries a comforting balm. He sat at their usual table, not watching a holographic Lena, but closing his eyes, letting his own, now fully informed memory, paint the scene. He remembered Lena's animated conversations about her art, her sketches spread across the table, her eyes sparkling with passion. But now, overlaid with that memory, was the profound understanding of her hidden struggles, the silent anxieties that must have hummed beneath her vibrant surface even then. The memories were no longer pure joy, but a poignant blend of happiness and sorrow, light and shadow. He spent an afternoon by the Han River, the same spot where they had often strolled, sharing dreams. The gentle breeze, the distant city hum, the glint of sunlight on the water, all were real, tangible. He recalled Lena's hopeful words about their future, about the art she would create, the life they would build. He remembered the subtle tremor in her voice, the fleeting shadow in her eyes, which he had so casually dismissed before. Now he recognized them as signs of her silent struggle, the weight of expectation and fear she carried. These echoes in the real world were different. They weren't flawless reproductions. They were imperfect, layered with new understanding, tinged with a deeper, more profound sadness. But they were genuine. They didn't offer the false comfort of an idealized past, but the challenging, yet ultimately more fulfilling, truth of a love that encompassed both joy and pain, strength and vulnerability. He was learning to grieve for the complete Lena, the one he had truly loved, flaws and all. The melancholic beauty of the world around him mirrored the complex beauty of his re-evaluated memories, each one now richer, more nuanced, and deeply, authentically human. Days later, Jian found himself once again at Dr. Han's office. But this time, the urgency and desperation had been replaced by a quiet solemnity. He wasn't seeking answers. He was seeking understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the human cost of their technological marvel. Dr. Han greeted him with a knowing, almost weary nod, as if he had anticipated Jian's return. The room, with its antique books and holographic diagrams, felt less like a sanctuary of science and more like a confessional. Jian recounted his journey through Lena's deeper archives, the agonizing revelation of her silent suffering, and the profound impact it had on his perception of their shared past. Dr. Han listened, his eyes unblinking, a silent testament to the many stories of grief and discovery he had undoubtedly witnessed. When Jian finished, a heavy silence settled between them. Dr. Han finally spoke, his voice soft, tinged with a profound, personal regret. The Chronos archive was born from my own grief, Jian. I lost someone dear to me, a partner who inspired my earliest work. I wished, desperately, to preserve every facet of their being, to hold onto a love that felt too precious to simply fade into memory. But in my pursuit of perfect preservation, in my desire to alleviate the pain of others, I made a fundamental miscalculation. He paused, his gaze fixed on a distant point, perhaps a memory of his own. We believed that by presenting the best version, the happiest, most resilient version of a loved one, we were offering solace. We called it emotional preservation, a way to shield the grieving from further pain. But what we inadvertently did was to sanitize truth, to strip away the very vulnerabilities that make us profoundly human, that make our love truly meaningful. He looked at Jian, his eyes filled with a shared burden of knowledge. The imperfections, the struggles, the hidden sorrows, these are not flaws, Jian. They are integral to who we are, to the tapestry of our existence. To remove them is to diminish the person, and to offer a form of solace that is, ultimately, a lie. I saw how this affected Lena, how she chose to filter her own experiences, to present a perfect self, even to the most invasive recording protocols, because she believed it was what you and the world expected. A quiet, profound understanding passed between the two men. Dr. Han, the architect of a flawed paradise, was as much a victim of his own creation as those who sought comfort within it. His confession wasn't an apology, but an act of profound, melancholic honesty, a shared acknowledgement of the complex, often painful, nature of true memory and authentic love. In the weeks that followed Dr. Han's confession, Jen's grief began to transform. It was no longer a hollow ache, nor a furious storm, but a profound, melancholic acceptance. He was learning to live again, not in spite of Lena's true story, but because of it. The revelations had peeled back layers of illusion, exposing a raw, beautiful truth that, while painful, felt infinitely more honest and fulfilling. He found himself drawn back to Lena's studio within their apartment. He no longer saw a place of lost potential or hidden sorrow, but a sacred space of authentic struggle. He picked up her unfinished sketches, not with longing for what could have been, but with a new reverence for her process. He saw the tentative lines, the smudged corrections, the moments of artistic doubt preserved on paper. These were not imperfections to be smoothed over. They were the very essence of her creative journey, the testament to her fierce spirit that continued to strive even in the face of despair. He studied her completed paintings, not just appreciating their aesthetic beauty, but seeing the subtle hues, the deeper brushstrokes that now, with his new understanding, spoke volumes of her hidden emotional landscapes. He saw the resilience in her colors, the quiet strength in her compositions, the fierce hope that flickered even in her darkest moments. He began to understand that true love was not about cherishing a flawless ideal, but about embracing the entirety of a person, their joys, their passions, their triumphs, and crucially, their vulnerabilities, their struggles, their silent pains. It was in these imperfections, these hidden depths, that her true beauty, her profound humanity truly shone. The Chronos archive, in its pursuit of perfection, had inadvertently masked the most precious aspects of Lena's being. But in breaking free from its hold, Jian had rediscovered the true art of memory, an art that embraced the raw, unedited, beautifully imperfect truth of a human life. He started painting again himself, something he hadn't done since Lena's passing. His strokes were hesitant, imperfect, but they were his, a new expression of a grief transformed, of a love reevaluated, of a life slowly, authentically, beginning to mend. The melancholic beauty of his new reality was a testament to Lena's enduring, complex legacy. Months later, the quiet of Jian's apartment was different. It was no longer a void screaming with absence, but a space imbued with a resonant, melancholic peace. He sat by the window, not staring blankly at the cityscape, but watching the soft, golden light of dawn creep across Neo-Seoul. The world still hummed with the pulse of the future, but Jian was anchored firmly in the present, carrying the past not as a burden, but as an integrated vital part of who he had become. On his desk lay not a holographic projection, nor a data slate linking to the Chronos, but a simple physical photograph. It was an old, slightly faded print of Lena and him, taken years ago, laughing together by the ocean. Her hair was windswept, her smile genuine, her eyes holding that familiar, deep warmth. He looked at it, not with a longing for an idealized past, but with a profound, gentle understanding of the woman captured within that moment. He saw the joy, yes, but also the subtle nuances in her expression that now, fully understood, spoke of her resilient spirit and the silent battles she fought even amidst happiness. A soft, melancholic smile touched his lips. It was a smile of acceptance, of enduring love, of a grief that had found its truest form. He understood now that Lena was not a collection of perfect memories to be preserved, nor a tragic figure defined by her hidden struggles. She was a complete, complex, beautifully flawed human being whose presence, both in life and in memory, had shaped him irrevocably. He didn't need the Chronos archive to bring her back. Her true memory lived within him, authentic and whole, encompassing her light and her shadows, her triumphs and her struggles. He carried her with him not as a ghost, but as an integral part of his own story. The city outside awakened, bathed in the soft glow of a new day. Jian took a deep breath, the scent of fresh air filling his lungs. He had found his way back, not by forgetting, but by truly remembering. He would continue to live, to create, to connect, carrying the authentic echoes of Lena's love and her profound humanity within him, embracing the melancholic beauty of a life truly lived, truly loved, and truly remembered.